Well, we don't have as much to read as last time. I have a record low number of notes. So I'm going to try and get it in 90 minutes. There's only 4 pages, and they aren't full and they aren't dense. So let's start out right away on page 98 and Act 4, Scene 1. 98. I'll start it out as Caesar and pass it on to Ron. Yep. Yeah, there's not quite as much as last time, though. He calls me boy and chides as he had power to beat me out of Egypt. My messenger he hath whipped with rods, dares me to personal combat. Caesar to Antony, let the old ruffian know I have many other ways to die. Meantime, laugh at his challenge. Well, we've noted before, in almost every other play, the third act is the watershed. And in the third act, there is usually something decisive that happens. And after that, the action shifts, and the characters begin to change. This play here is no exception at all. Caesar, in his speech here, has not suddenly become a Mars character. He's not acting out of character when he tauntingly laughs at Antony. He's trying to keep him enraged and hence keep him off balance. In second speech is the first time he discloses what has been in his mind all the time. Singular dominance. He wants the whole world for himself. And like a Saturnian person, they usually keep things concealed. Concealed sometimes so that they can have the advantage of surprise, but they will open up when they're totally sure of their place. And that's where Caesar is now. He's confident of success. And so he feels he can open up a little bit. All right, Jerry, you want to lead it off? Prometheus. What means this? Do I have more to say here?
It's one of those odd tricks which sort of shoots out of the mind. If I walk on a stool, I wish I could engage so many men. And all of you trapped up together in a sentence that I might do you service, so good as you have done. The gods forbid. The way we go, may not be played.
it's the first time I've heard the word pronounced in such a way that we know that the name comes from us. The name Dolores. Your pronunciation is different than the American pronunciation. You wouldn't even know that the American pronunciation came from that word. So our name Dolores, we pronounce it Dolores in the United States. So yeah, good. All right. Anthony has not changed significantly yet. He is making brash, brave statements. It's just more of the Jupiter that is speaking, and it's speaking with the values of Mars. Jupiter is always confident, overconfident often. He sees things in an optimistic light, and that is both its weak and its strong point. It is a weakness in that sometimes it doesn't see things as they really are when very concrete facts are necessary. And it is its strength because sometimes blind optimism does carry the day no matter what is happening. There's another side of Jupiter in this scene, because earlier when we looked at Antony, he was indulgent in pleasure. Now he is being emotionally indulgent in bringing everyone to tears. His indulgence, his emotional indulgence, is almost romantic, and it's almost sentimental. And he's called to arms. That affects people because people are bound to you. They're bound to you by your bravery. There's a good deal to be said for the word galvanic. Galvanic has to do with action. When you have a character like Antony that does act when other people would like to, but just don't, that galvanizes an energy and everybody follows. That's what makes for a leader. And so if he becomes soppy and sentimental, it's going to go to his men. They're going to take it right off. It's much better if he could do what he has to do with all of this ballyhooing. And it is at times like this, when there is too much sentimentalism, that one can appreciate the clean, spare, Saturnian ways that don't waste themselves on all kinds of emotionalism. All right. I'm up the bat, I guess. Brother, good night. Tomorrow is the day. List. How now? You hear this? Do you hear this? Well, this is probably the most curious scene in the entire play. And it also relates to the difficulty that we have with perspective in our interactions with the spiritual worlds. In his time, Even in history, Antony was said to be possessed of the spirit of Heracles, or Hercules. Hercules is Roman, Heracles is Greek. In fact, his descendants, the Antonines, were always said to have that same distinction. They had the spirit of Hercules about them. As far as Michelangelo Antonioni is concerned, I believe it every bit, because all of his movies had that Antonine way about them. They were very strong and stark, almost like a hero. Now, this doesn't mean that Antony was a medium for the ghost of Heracles. If a personal fact that was true, it wasn't like mediumship. At most, it could have been an overshadowing. There's another way to look at it. Great seers, most especially Rudolf Steiner, have said that the gods in the transcendent spiritual planes act our lives out before we live them. Now, since there are billions of people, and they come in and out of rebirth, gods would have to be awfully busy to be acting out people's lives before they live them, because, that means several million a day being born. So we can't understand that outlook in a completely material sense. In the spiritual worlds, especially in the transcendent spiritual worlds that are even beyond concrete thought, there is no time in the way that we think of time. Action is also different. The gods on that exalted spiritual level do what they do by living in their character. We talk about living a spiritual life, and living a spiritual life is not busy, active work. It is what we, by intent, put into our life. It's very much an act of will. So they put into their character their living will in a sense of all-out sacrifice. So this can be regarded as living out the myth that denotes character. Each myth has a character right at its core. Everything in the phenomenal worlds, including this dense physical world, is condensed out of those transcendent, chaotic, spiritual worlds. Some refer to the condensation, or the carrying out in concretion, as living out the myths in history. Our little lives are often cross-sections of several myths which live in several divine spiritual beings. And those myths and the divine spiritual beings out of which our lives are precipitated tell the story of our lives. Sometimes some myths predominate over others. Sometimes it is only one that stands out. Now, this seems to have been the case for Antony. He was living the myth of Hercules. And he lived out the life of Hercules, both in battle and in womanizing. Hercules fought battles all over the known world, and he had lovers all over the known world. The difficulty of perspective, of place, as we mentioned earlier, is similar to the difficulty with the perspective of time. One doesn't really know what, in a timely sense, when things are in the eternal now. So similarly, one doesn't know whether Antony in the spirit of Heracles, or Heracles is in the spirit of Antony. Because in the chaotic transcendent realms, it's all the same place. And no doubt it's taking, one is influencing the other. In any case, we can't take this materialistically, and we can't take it literally. But in any case, Heracles and Antony represent indomitable warriors. I have a great deal of respect for the power of rumor and the psychology of rumor, because in rumor, sometimes in gossip, is how things are surfaced from the unconscious realms or the less conscious realms, and things are brought out in that way. So it's not in the least surprising that none of these, like just one of these wires says, oh, the spirit of Heracles has left him. Nobody's told him that. He hasn't seen it with clairvoyance or anything like that, but it's just rumor. Some people get a sense that this is what is going on. And sometimes people get that sense and they say something like that jokingly. But it isn't joking. It's really a reality. And so when a rumor like that is started, it started because that's what the truth is. What is being said really, maybe not necessarily that Heracles has left Antony, but in the perspective problem, perhaps Antony has left Heracles, meaning to say that he is now no longer living in perfect sync with that myth. And he's not living in touch with the ideal or the moral of the stories of Heracles. And for that reason, when he's out of sync with it, he can no longer attune himself to it and draw on it for strength and see things clearly. So it's very likely that the perspective is reversed. Now this act has of Antony leaving Heracles or Heracles leaving Antony shows that the play and the characters in it have a lot of harmony with the mysteries. The mysteries of Heracles predominated quite a bit of the Greek and Roman world. There were cults to Heracles as far away as Russia in those times, and they were all in concourse with each other. The key thing to show that this is tied to the mysteries is that the music that represents the departure of Heracles comes from the underworld. And the underworld is the realm of the children of fire. That Phonian kind of fire, that volcanic kind of fire, is related to the mysteries. If it had been a mysticism that was for the children of water, it would have been more aerial, and it would have come out of the air, and it wouldn't have been that underground kind of thing. All right? Who's up? Millie, you're up. Oh, she's still reading, yeah. Sooth, la, I'll help, thus it must be. Yeah, go ahead. I have almost nothing to say about this scene. It doesn't seem to be really significant in the development of any of the characters. It does set a scene for what's going to come up, and I'm not sure if it serves any other purpose or not. The only purpose that I can see is that it's the first case that we see, at least among Antony and Cleopatra, if not all the other cases that we've seen, that there's a little bit of an intimacy, that there is a closeness, and that there is a trust, and it's sort of like an everyday togetherness that they have, and that probably adds drama to what's coming up afterwards. All right, let's go on to number 5. The gods make this a happy day to Antony. Go, Eros, send his treasure after. Do it. Detain no jot. I charge thee. Write to him. I will subscribe. Gentle adieus and greetings. Say that I wish that he never find more cause to change a master. All my fortunes have corrupted honest men. Dispatch. Enobarbus. This scene, short as it is, does develop Antony's character a little further. As we have been following it, it is very Jupiterian. Jupiter is almost never vengeful, and it is almost always forgiving. Jupiter is also extremely noble, and it's generous, even in betrayal. So, and when Antony sends the treasure, he's doing it out of a full spirit of generosity, saying, thank you for all you did for me, instead of bickering and feeling bad about his leaving. It shows just how far his optimism runs, because he remains upbeat even though he's lost the best and closest and his most faithful man. And he's still optimistic. Most people would shudder at the thought of somebody like Enobarbus leaving. Cracks are beginning to show, and he's not only at the edge of the breaking point, the light is now starting to shine in, because he's beginning to see not only his own corruption, he's becoming more of a bigger man in seeing that his corruption is leading to the corruption of others. He feels responsible for having made the conditions that made his best soldier have to leave and become a turncoat, and he's taking responsibility for his part in it. So there is little inklings of growth already. All right. On to number 6. I alone, the villain of the earth, and I feel I am so most. O Antony, thou mine of bounty, how wouldst thou have paid my better service when my turpitude thou dost so crown with gold? This blows my heart. If swift thought break it not, a swifter mean shall outstrike thought. But thought will do it, I feel. I feel against thee. I fight against thee. No, I will go seek some ditch wherein to die. The foulest best fits the latter part of my life. In here, Caesar is becoming even more open. And he's no more lovable. He shows his nastiness and in putting the Antony's own troops at the front lines. But Caesar is open and saying it's going to be one world now. Enobarbus, on the other hand, is a true martial character. It has Mars, in the Iliad, for example, has been known to run from the field of battle in injury. That it can take, even though its injury is immortal if it's in a god. But when it is the pride that is wounded, the wound is even sorer to the martial type of figure. So though Antony didn't intend to do so, he could not have delivered a more punishing blow to Enobarbus than he did. His frank generosity pierces the armor of pride and goes right to the core of the character of Enobarbus, and his martial nature cannot stand that he did not live up proudly as he should have. All right?
Tired. We get to gauge ourselves too far. Caesar himself has learned in our oppression exceeds what we expected. Oh my goodness, this is what we need. Have we done so at first? We have only been told with house, not with this. No reason to face. And we are
I'll halt after. This is more just of a scene setter, just keeping us abreast of developments. Antony continues with his generosity. He's fighting now for his honor, and he's not fighting for spoils. So everything that he takes or wins, he gives away immediately because all he wants is honor. Let's start her out, Ron. By the way, the word in line 2 is soft G. It's gests, as in gesture, or gesta. It's a French word. It's an interesting scene. Antony seems to be in a very sanguine mood, a very martial mood. He's roaring. He's in his element. He's efficient. He's bloody. He's firm. And he's terse. Cleopatra, on the other hand, shows more of her Venus and shows how ignorant Venus is of things martial. Not surprising, since she is dormant or has suppressed the martial element in her unconscious. That's what attracts her to Antony in the first place. She's ignorant of war, and in her fear, she doesn't think Antony's going to return, and she's surprised at his return. And her hair is even grayed from concern. And this is literally possible. There are cases where people have gone from being dark-haired to gray-haired overnight. Scientists don't believe it, but it has happened. Antony has gotten back into his martial mode, and he's acting well within it and using it very well, but he hasn't gotten so far that he isn't a little too exuberant about himself. He can brag pretty well, as you would expect a Mars-Jupiter person to do. They're both signs, they're both planets that like to brag. All right, let's continue on. Stand close and list him.
Be witness to me, O thou blessed. My memory holds it shall upon record their hateful memory, poor Enobarbus did before thy face repent. Enobarbus? Peace, part 3. Sovereign distress, true melancholy, monsters damp the night descend upon me. Life very rapid to my with, may hang no longer on me. My heart against the sin, heartless of my fault. Will ride with me, great and hunger, all lost. O Antony, O learn that my revolt is infinite. Give me in thy own particular. That the world might be a register, a master leader, and a fugitive. O Antony, speak to them.
Let's hear him, but the things he speaks make us conceive him. Let's do so.
Souls rather, for so bad a prayer after this was never yet received.
Awake, sir. Awake. Speak to us.
Hear you, sir?
Land of death and blood.
You got more.
Heart drops. Fury wakes sleepers. Let us pray for the God. He is of God. Our hours is fully out. Come on then. He may recover yet.
We have been looking all along as Enobarbus as first man to Antony. So actually where our term best man comes as in matrimony. We have been seeing Enobarbus as a pure Mars person. Actually, no matter how dominant one astrological component of our character may be, it can't be completely pure. We all have the whole zodiac and planets and houses within us, and we've had a long evolution with all of them. In this case, we've been saying that Mars has had no has shown no complement of Venus to his outer Mars. It's possible that an individual could steel himself and seal himself from intercourse with the unconscious, but he has displayed no hint that he hasn't done that, because it seems like he's completely cut off from the feminine within. What is also possible is that perhaps he has endeavored to make the inner man martial also. Greek men tried to do that very thing. They were prejudiced against women, and they felt women were inferior, and chose other men as their ideals. The ideals that represented what they wished to become within themselves. This produces Mars within and Mars without. And when Mars assumes the role that is normally occupied by the inner opposite gender, it is a loss of polarity. In the Greek cases, the Greeks, as a result of this practice, became homosexuals. There is no sign of homosexuality in Enobarbus. But his chagrin at his dishonor, which is the ultimate stain against his martial soul, is genuine and noble and lofty in a pure Mars sense. And it is a very beautiful sentiment. However, none of this distracts from the fact that he hitched his whole being, inward and outward, to Antony. And then, when he betrays Antony, he's betraying his whole being. There's nothing left to hang on to, nothing to stand on. If you're going to have only one talent and utilize only that one thing, if it gets defeated, you have no recourse. You're really washed up. So when his ideal acts toward him in the fashion of that ideal, the mirroring of his shame is devastating. It doesn't say here that he fell on his sword or anything like that. He already committed psychological suicide when he left Antony, and this seems to be just carrying it out and the playing out of it, and he perhaps died because everything that he lived by and that he believed in and that constituted his whole being in a psychological sense is gone now. One act did it. That's it. All right. Who's up? I think, Tim, I think you're up. Scene 10. Antony is still in Mars mode, very much in Mars mode. His pride is up. He'll fight in any element. Hopefully we can't take him literally on that, because if he were to fight in energy, it would be magic of some kind. It's bad enough that we have physical violence. He's still overconfident, because Mars is fiery, and fire and water do not mix. It is true that Mars has its secondary rulership in Scorpio, which is a watery sign, but there it has the power of Pluto to consummate the blending of fire and water, which is what the alchemists called Scorpio. Hence, his second folly is to fight by water again. Let's go on to the next scene. Caesar, on the other hand, is still in Saturn mode, cautious, ever cautious. He sees the appearances of things, and he doesn't seem to commit immediately. He waits to see things out. That's the way that Saturn prevails over Mars when it does. Mars is brash and impetuous, impulsive, and often peremptory. Saturn is patient and controlling. Mars acts rashly and prematurely, anything to have action. Saturn waits and plans and wins over Mars when Mars expends itself or puts itself into jeopardy. Mars and Saturn are not opposites, though, as Jupiter and Saturn are. Mars and Saturn can work together. Mars has its primary rulership and its first rulership in Aries, where it tends to fight like a frontline foot soldier. It has that kind of courage. Mars has its exaltation in Capricorn, which is ruled by Capricorn. This says that with experience, control can bring the energies of Mars to a mechanical perfection, the mechanical perfection that a field marshal has. All right. I think you're... Go ahead.
Yet there are not mine. Where none find a stand, I shall discover all. I bring thee word, great how this life goes.
Swallows have built in Cleopatra's sails their nests. The auguries say they know not. They cannot tell. Look grimly and dare not speak their knowledge. Antony is valiant and dejected by starts. His fretted fortunes give him hope and fear, has and has not.
All is lost. This foul Egyptian hath betrayed me. My fleet hath yielded to the foe, and yonder they cast their caps up and carouse together, like friends long lost. Triple turned whore is thou. Hast sold me to this novice, and my heart makes only wars on thee. Bid them all fly. For when I am revenged upon my charm, I have done all. Bid them all fly, be gone. O sun, thy uprise shall I see no more. Fortune and Antony part here, even here. Do we shake hands? All come to this. The hearts that spaniel me at heels to whom I gave their wishes to discandy, melt their sweets. On blossoming Caesar and his pines barked, that overtop them all, betrayed I am. Oh, this false soul of Egypt, this grave charm, whose eye becked forth my wars and called them home, whose bosom was my crownet, my chief end, like a right gypsy hat that fast and loose beguiled me to the very heart of loss. What Eros, Eros.
We got one more line yet.
Ah, thou spell avant.
Why is thy load enraged against his love? Vanish, or I shall give thee thy deserving and blemish Caesar's triumph. Let him take thee and hoist thee up to the shouting plebeians. Follow his chariot, like the greatest spot of all thy sex, most monster-like be shown for tourist diminutives, for dolts, and let patient Octavia plow thy visage up with her prepared nails. 'Tis well we are gone, if it be well to live, but better 'twere thou fell'st into my fury, for one death might have prevented many. Hero's hope. The shirt of Nessus is upon me. Teach me, Alcides, thou mine ancestor, thy rage. Let me lodge Lycus on the horns of the moon, and with those hands that grasp the heaviest club, subdue my worthiest self. The
which shall die. To the young Roman boy she hath sold me, and I fall under his plot. She died for Eris.
This scene marks the big turning point for Antony. He's been struggling to recoup from his past debauch and weakness, and now he turns to an even more precipitous fall. Scarius sees it coming. He says Antony is alternating in his consciousness between valiancy and dejection. In our modern language, we take the dejection out and we put the word depression. Depression and fear are not normal to either Mars or Saturn. So he's on the edge, and his consciousness is being depressed into the unconsciousness, where his latency... Mars or Jupiter. Mars or Jupiter are not depressive. So he's being depressed into the unconscious, and he's about to see his latencies and weaknesses that he has been hiding too long and that have been externalized in Cleopatra. There are a whole bunch of things in this really short scene. So first, let's look at the surrender. There has been nothing to indicate that Caesar has made a deal with Cleopatra. So the surrender is most likely spontaneous. The question is why? Why in some battles, not only this one, are the people who greatly outnumbered and outgunned, why did they come from being underdogs to holding firm and eventually prevailing when all the odds are against them? It seems to depend on spirit. Muhammad, when he writes in the Quran, says that in various of his battles he tells his followers that spirits and jinns and all other things have been participating in battles. He's correct in that. Everything from archangels to elementals often participate in battles. Looking at this not necessarily in the nature of spiritual beings, but in the sense of us living out myths, we can see indeed that Antony has left Heracles, or Heracles has left Antony, and the spiritual force that Antony had that could command people is not present for him anymore. And he can't spread it across all of his troops, especially over the navy. So it doesn't even require a rumor to have been spread to all of the navy. They sense. And this is the kind of thing that produces a surrender. There have been a lot of famous battles where something like this has happened. All right, now let's look at Antony. Why should Antony accuse Cleopatra, whom he loves, when he doesn't have any evidence? Sure, she did in fearfulness. In the first battle by sea, she ran, but she hasn't given any evidence of being a turncoat. What usually happens is we don't trust strange things until they become familiar, until we have interacted with them and have become close to them. Cleopatra represents what Antony is weak in, the part of the soul that has been ignored. And it is so ignored and so depressed into his unconscious that it is foreign. Therefore, that part of his being is strange, just as Cleopatra, who represents that in him, is strange. Moreover, he doesn't want to admit to these weaknesses. And what we don't want to admit to, we often project. And so he has projected his need to her as the object of his attention. This is brought to us very clearly by the fact that he is disrespecting his own weakness when he calls her a thrice turned whore, meaning to say that she was first lovers with Caesar, and then lovers with Pompey, and now lovers with Antony, and she left all of them. She turned away from all of them. So he doesn't respect her anymore. We often don't respect what we think is shameful in our own being, and that's what's happening to Antony. So he's now calling her also a witch. He's saying that she has put a charm on him and that now he's coming to light, not realizing that his spell that he is in is not bewitchment. It is a matter that he doesn't have full consciousness. And now he's starting to wake up to that, but he doesn't really know that in a full psychological sense. And he's calling her names. And when you run out of facts, you're still filled with enmity or bitterness, one always turns to names. Now, the fact that this is such an important scene is in his last speech. In an earlier talk, we mentioned that this play had no poetry to it and almost no mythological allusions. Now, Antony starts spouting mythology, and it's quite arcane mythology, and it's appropriate at that. And he continues in a mythological vein all the way to his death. The myth that he quotes is the myth of the shirt of Nicias. Nicias was a centaur that what happened is Heracles was headed toward Asia Minor with one of his wives, and they came to this river, and they couldn't swim across. And so Nicias was a centaur who had it against Heracles in the first place, because earlier Heracles had wiped out most of the centaurs. And so he comes up and he says, I can carry you, I have the strength of a horse, I can carry you both across the river, but it can only be one at a time. And so Heracles says, take my wife. So he takes her across the river. It's a very broad river, and when he gets on the other side, he begins to rape her. Heracles gets out his bow, and he shoots the arrow across the river and kills Nicias. And Nicias, as he's dying, he hasn't lost all of his pain yet, and he says to the wife, he says, collect my blood and keep it and weave a shirt for Heracles. And because he's been unfaithful to almost all of the wives and women that he's had before in his life. And if you make this shirt and dip it into a solution with my blood, when he once wears that shirt, he will be faithful. He'll never leave you again. What happens is that it's a magical potion. And the shirt is made and it's brought to him by the man mentioned in the myth here. And when Heracles puts on the shirt, it burns like fire. But you can't pull it off. And he's in so much pain that the bearer who brought the shirt to him, he threw him, and he apparently hooked on the horns of the moon, according to the story. And this is the death of Heracles, which means he isn't going to be untrue to her anymore, because this is death. Because what happens is as he's dying, he rips off pieces of the shirt, and it's clung to him so much that pieces of his flesh go with it until he dies from pulling off his own flesh in the pain. This is, if the centaur represents the bestial element in our being, and the centaur's blood represents the stuff of desire, this is talking about the whole purgatorial experience in the desire world after we die. That we burn from our own desires because we don't have our body to numb us, our dense physical body to numb us from the desires anymore, and we burn from them, and as we cast off the desires, it rends our body itself and tears it all apart. It looks like something very ugly, but in the purgatorial sense, it's something quite positive. So we're back to the Heracles myth again, and we're back to talking about the death of Heracles, and we're talking about the mysteries of Heracles. But back on mythology itself, Antony was a noble, well-educated Roman gentleman. And mythology was no doubt part of his language, just as song titles and song lyrics are part of our language. We often say things alluding to songs rather than to myths. Now, his soldiering life has probably blunted some of his culture, but not all of it. What I suspect is that from the moment he has met Cleopatra and he has unconsciously gotten in touch with his starving love nature, he's been in something of a mild trance-like state. He hasn't been bewitched by her, but he's been in a trance-like state, and he's been now by this event that is his sure downfall on the end of his rulership. He's been shocked into awareness. He's not completely aware of everything in him, because none of us is completely aware of what's in us. Now, this might seem far-fetched, but I can tell you, having the sun in Scorpio, that lust is a very powerful and pervasive kind of thing. It can undermine any amount of culture, and you can be lost in a fog of lust that lowers everything in your being. In any case, his eyes have now been opened. He has shaken off some of the things that have been dulling his character from its earlier state, and he's perhaps beginning to see even more deeply into his own being. So that mythology has returned to his consciousness. This is important in another way, because it shows that he is now thinking in a grand cosmic mythological scale. That's important, because that's what a tragic fall is supposed to do. It's supposed to take us out of our little life and cause us to see it in a much deeper, bigger sense. Because, the gods are not living out the myths for us to be born by in idleness. It is because there is something very important. And even the little tiny things in our life are representative of things that are very, very meaningful. And so he's no longer going to indulge himself in the personal pettiness of his failure, but he's going to look at it in a larger sense. So this says that this play, at least as far as he is concerned, is having an effect that is truly tragic in a classic sense, and he's having a tragic growth spurt of magnum proportions at this point. So that was a really important scene, at least as far as I can see. All right, here we go. Who's up?
Help me, my women. Oh, he's more mad than Telamon for his shield. War of Thessaly was never so embossed. To the monuments, they unlocked this and sent in word you are dead. The soul and body rise, not more in parting than greatness going on.
To the monuments, Mardian, go tell him I have slain myself. Say that the last word I spoke was Antony, and word it piteously. Hence, Mardian, and bring me how he takes my death. To the monument.
Until now, we haven't talked about the relationship of Cleopatra to women, because it didn't seem germane, but now it is. Charmian is the first woman to Cleopatra, and her position is psychologically analogous to that of Antony, though her station in life is not the same as Enobarbus was. What I mean to say is that Charmian is like Enobarbus. And in the same way that Enobarbus is Mars to Antony's Mars, Charmian is Venus to the Cleopatra's Venus. So there is a further correspondence. In this scene, it is Cleopatra's turn to make her own mistake that is going to precipitate her fall, which fall will be as precipitous as that of Antony. She follows Charmian's suggestion to lock herself up and to tell Antony that she's dead. She follows it because it's exactly the kind of thing that she was doing in the earlier acts of the play. She says, if he's happy, tell him I'm ill. If he's down, tell him I'm happy. You always take that opposite stance. So when Charmian makes a suggestion, she follows right along with it. So it's right with her. She knew how, or she knows how, to be titillating and to draw out Antony's Mars as a lover. But she does not understand his martial nature with her own martial nature, because it is suppressed in her being and it's undeveloped in her own being. The only kind of thing that she knows how to do is, in a tragic crisis, do what she's continued to do. But psychologically, when we have a crisis, that's just what we're not supposed to do, because a crisis brings us to the point where what we've been doing all along won't work anymore, and we have to change and do something different. And this is why we have tragic falls. If we don't make the change and turn the corner and be something different, then we're going to fall. But the fall will be for our development. So what she does is she relies on Venus when the crisis is asking her not to do that. All right, who's up?
Sometimes we see a cloud that's dragonish, a vapor sometimes like a bear or lion, a towered citadel, a pendant rock, orchid mountain or blue promontory, with rocks upon that nod unto the world and mock our eyes with air. Thou hast seen these signs. They are black Vespers pageants.
Aye, my lord.
That which is now a horse, even with a thought, erect his limbs and makes it indistinct, as water is in water.
It does, my lord. My good knave, Eros, now thy captain is even such a body. Here I am, Antony, yet cannot hold this visible shape in my name. I made these words for Egypt and the queen, whose heart I thought I had, for she had mine, which whilst it was mine, had annexed it unto 1,000,000 more. Now lost. She, Eros, has packed cards with Caesar, and false played my glory unto an enemy's triumph. Nay, weep, gentle Eros, there is left us ourselves to end ourselves. O thy vile lady, she robbed me of my sword.
Woe is me, my mistress, what may be, and her fortune failed the night entirely. Hence, Sociola, peace. She hath betrayed me, and shall die in death.
Death of one person can
that she has discharged. What thou wouldst do is done unto thy hand. The last she spake was Antony, most noble Antony. Then amidst the tearing groan did break the name of Antony. It was divided between her heart and bliss. She rendered life by means so very vain.
Yes, then?
Yeah.
Unarm Eros, the long day's task is done, and we must see. That thou departest hence safe, thus pay thy labor richly. Go. Off, pluck off. The sevenfold shield of Ajax cannot keep the battery from my heart. Oh, cleave my sides. Heart, once be stronger than thy continent. Crack thy frail case. A pace, Eros, a pace. No more a soldier. Bruise in pieces. Go. You have been nobly born. From me a while. I will overtake thee, Cleopatra, and weep for my pardon. So it must be, for now all length is torture. Since the torch is out, lie down and stray no further. Now all labor mars what it does. Yea, very force entangles itself in strength. Seal then, and all is done. Eros, I come, my queen. Eros, stay for me where souls do couch on flowers. We'll hand in hand and with our sprightly port make the ghosts gaze. Dido and her Aeneas shall want troops, and all the haunt be ours. Come, Eros, Eros.
What would my lord?
Since Cleopatra died, I have lived in such dishonor that the gods detest my baseness. I that with my sword quartered the world and o'er green Neptune's back. With ships made cities, condemn myself to lack the courage of a woman, less noble mind. And she which by her death our Caesar tells, I am conqueror of myself. Thou art sworn Eros, that when the exigent should come, which now is come indeed, when I should see behind me the inevitable prosecution of disgrace and horror, that on my command thou then wouldst kill me, do it, the time is come. Thou strikest not me, 'tis Caesar thou defeatst. Put color in thy cheek.
The gods withhold me. Should I do that which all the Parthian darts your enemy lost aim and could not?
Eros, wouldst thou be windowed in great Rome and see thy master thus, with reached arms bending down his corrigible neck, his face subdued to penetrate shame, whilst the wheeled seat of fortunate Caesar drawn before him branded his baseness that ensued?
Would not see it.
Someday, for with the wound I must be cured. Draw that thy honest sword, which thou hast worn most useful for thy country.
Oh, sir, pardon me.
I did make thee free. It's worse than I've been to do this when I made thee. Do it at once, for thy precedent services are all but accidents on purpose. Draw and come.
Turn from me the noble covenants, wherein the worship of the whole world lies.
Go thee.
My sword is drawn.
Then let it do at once the thing why thou hast drawn it.
My dear master, my captain, and my emperor, let me say before I strike this bloody stroke, farewell.
'Tis said, man, and farewell.
Farewell, great chief. Shall I strike now?
Now, Eros.
Why, then there, thus I do escape the sorrow of Antony's death.
Christ nobler than myself. Thou teachest me, O valiant Eros, what I should and thou couldst know. My queen and Eros have by their brave instruction got upon me in littleness and record, but I will be a bridegroom in my death, and run into it as to a lover's bed. Come then, and Eros, thy master dies, thy scholar, to do thus. I learned of thee how, not dead, not dead, regard, oh, dispatch me.
What's the noise?
I have done my work ill, friends. Oh, make an end of what I have begun.
The star has fallen.
And time is at his period.
And last,
And woe.
Let him that loves me strike me dead.
Not I.
All right. Or anyone.
Thy death and fortunes bid thy followers fly. This sword that shone to Caesar, this tidings shall enter me from him.
Where's Anthony?
Jerry, up. 122, line 113. There, Diomede.
There.
lives he? Wilt thou not answer, man?
Art thou there, Diomede? Draw thy sword, and give me sufficing strokes for death.
Most absolute Lord, my mistress Cleopatra sent me to thee.
When did she send thee?
No, my lord.
Where is she?
Locked in her monument, she had a prophesying fear of what had come to pass. For when she saw, which never shall be fair, you did suspect she had disposed with Caesar, and that your rage would not be purged. She sent you word she was dead. But fearing, since how it might work, hath sent me to proclaim the truth, and I am come. I dread too late.
Too late, good Diomed. Call my guard, I prithee.
What hold? The Emperor's guard. The guard, what hold? Come, your Lord calls.
Bear me, good friends, where Cleopatra lies. It is the last service that I shall command you.
Oh, officer, you may not live to wear all your true followers out.
Most heavy day. Nay, my fellows, do not please sharp fate to grace it with your sorrows. Bid that welcome which comes to punish us, and we punish it, seeming to bear it lightly. Take me up, I have led you oft, carry me now, good friends, and have my thanks for all. Wow, gratitude right down to the very end. When he starts talking about clouds and everything else, he's really in Jupiterian mode, a beautiful Jupiterian mode. He has some lovely lines in here. His soul has been freed from psychological bondage, from all of the lust and all of the material ambitions and desires and things that were holding him to the earth. And now he's beginning to soar. Some of those words are as good as any that have been in Shakespeare. The change has made him consciousness of change itself. He has the sense of metamorphosis, and he has the sense of the impermanence of things as they change from one state to another, and perhaps even some of the emptiness or vanity of those individual states. He's probably sensing his own transition being imminent. The death of Cleopatra is hard for him. He needed her, and now he feels utterly lost and empty-lived without her. Though he has regained some of the flow from his soul, he still has not recognized and cultured the loving Venus within. So for all of his announcements and pronouncements, he's still untrustful here. After he hears that she is dead, he sees her differently. But he sees her in a way that is within character. He sees her as a fellow martial person. In the modern language, he probably sees Cleopatra for her suicide as a mensch or something like that. He probably considers his own suicide. He has gone through all of these psychological changes, almost like chord changes in a piece of music. First he has a romantic tone, then it is an admiration of her, and then he has a shame of his own pride in staying alive, and then it is pride itself when he thinks of Caesar. The interaction that he has with Eros is interesting. Mars can be very brave, and in excitement and in frenzy, it will do what amounts to being suicide in a full frontal charge. But it isn't really suicide. Jupiter will usually never suicide. It's too optimistic and it's too filled with a higher life or principles or something like that. So Antony, having this Mars-Jupiter character, probably really doesn't want to die, even though the Roman code and the military code demand it of him or require it of him. So when he asks Eros to do the deed, that wasn't unusual. I think we saw that also in Julius Caesar. That was it Brutus that had his page hold the sword while he fell on it? That was often the case. So Antony asks of Eros to do what he doesn't want to do to himself. And that is out of character. That is really an abasement. That's the final tragic act for Antony. Not the suicide, but asking one of his men to do what he would not do for himself. And for a Mars person, and a Mars person with Jupiterian pride, that is the ultimate thing. Thus, he has shocked himself again, and he has humiliated himself again through another suicide, and he's humbled to see things even more clearly. So this is really a classic tragedy, and the growth that he undergoes in making tragic blunders is quite appreciable. All right, let's finish up. Yeah, I believe so.
Oh, Charmian, I will never go from hence.
Be comforted, madam. No, I will not. All strange and terrible events are welcome, but comforts we despise. Our size of sorrow proportioned to our cause must be as great as that which makes it. Oh, now, is he dead?
That's about it. I'm not dead. Look out on the other side of your monument. Guard have brought him hither.
O son, bend the great spear that moves still. Docking stands the varying shore of the world. Oh, Antony, 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 help, Charmian, help, Iris, help, help friends below, but sorely given.
Peace. Not Caesar's valor hath overdone Antony, but Antony has triumphed on himself.
So it should be, but not what Antony should not grant you. Oh, 'tis so.
I'm dying. Egypt dying. Only I hear it pardon. People hewn them a while on its own. Many thousand kisses before last I lay upon thy lips.
I dare not, dear my lord, pardon. I dare not, lest I be taken. Not the imperious show of the full-formed fortune Caesar ever shall be broached with me. If knife, drugs, serpents have edge, sting, or operation, I am safe. Your wife Octavia, with her modest eyes and still conclusion, shall acquire no honor demurring upon me. But come, Antony, help me, my women. We must draw thee up. Assist, good friends.
Oh, quick, or I am gone.
Here's sport indeed, how heavy weighs my lord. Her strength is all gone into heaviness. What makes the weight? Had I great Juno's power, the strong-winged Mercury should fetch thee up and set thee by Jove's side. Yet come a little, wishers were ever fools. Oh, come, come, come. And welcome, welcome, die when thou hast lived, quicken with kissing, and my lips that power, thus would I wear them out.
A heavy sight.
I'm dying, Egypt, dying. Give me some wine and let me speak a little.
No, let me speak. And let me rail so high that Saul's housewife fortune break her wheel, provoked by my offense.
That word, sweet queen, of Caesar seek your honor and your safety. Oh,
We do not go together.
Gentle, hear me. Not about Caesar. Trust but Publius.
A resolution in my hands on trust and looks none about Caesar.
the miserable change now, and my end lament, nor sorrow, has but pleased your thoughts, in feeding them with those my former portions wherein I lived. The greatest prince of the world, noblest, and I do now, not basely die, not cowardly, put off my helmet to my countrymen, but Roman, by a Roman. Valiantly vanquished, now my spirit is going, I can no more.
Noblest of men, would die, hast thou no care of me? Shall I abide in this dull world, which in thy absence is no better than a sty? O see, my women, the crown of the world doth melt. My lord, O withered is the garden of the Lord. The soldier's hold is fallen. Young boys and girls are level now with men. The odds is gone, and there is nothing left remarkable in the dusty mill.
Oh, quietness, lady.
She's dead too, our sovereign.
Lady, madam,
Oh, madam,
royal Egypt, empress.
Peace, peace, Iris.
No more, but you know, woman, commanded by full passion, taking the chance, love dismissed chairs. It were for me, throw my scepter at these various gods, to tell them that this world is equal theirs, till they spoil our children. All working on patient is Scottish, and impatient does become God. That's mad. Then a dog that's mad. Then is it sin to rush into the secret house of death, ere death dare come to us? How do you women? What good cheer? Why, how now, charm him. My noble girls, O women, look, our lamp is spent without. Good sirs, take heart, we'll bury him, and then, what's brave, what's noble, let's do it after the high Roman fashion, and make death proud to take us. Come away, this case that gives spirit now is full. Ah, women, come, we have no friend, resolution, free this hand.
Well, Cleopatra is now without Antony, and she has to face her own inner nature as exposed by him and her death, which is to some extent in her hands. And so she's sort of at the extent or at the end of her character, and she's acting also out of character. Venus loves comfort. And for her to say, as she does in this scene, that she was going to despise comfort, is saying that she's really at the extremity of her character, if not totally out of it. She's not merely afraid of death, as Venus often is, and as we have seen before when she ran from battle, but she has her own besetting pride of not wanting to be taken by Caesar and all of that it means. So great is her fear that it raises a very big question. If she really loved Antony so much, why is she afraid to leave her monument to give him last kisses goodbye? Her love is maybe not that great. She's at the extent of it, and it's the kind of love that's great at partying and at trysting and at things like that. But when it comes down to the loss of her own life, it probably was not adequate. So even though love was her specialty, it wasn't a love that could carry her beyond herself. She is deeply chagrined, and her character is undergoing rapid changes, and we'll talk about that all next time. And that's it for tonight. I told you I was going to get it in under 90 minutes no matter what.
I don't like the way you read Koepsel there at all.
Why?
This is very unkind, uncaring of her, unsympathetic towards her.
Yes, it is not, my rendition is not a highly compassionate one, but I don't think a greatly inaccurate one. Why is she afraid to come out of the monument then?
I don't care why she was afraid to come out of the mountain. Why would that have so much to do with her love?
Because her lover is asking her for a last kiss, and she's saying, no, I can't do that, because as long as I'm here, Caesar can't get me. That's what she said. Yeah.
I think you're being extremely saturnine in your depiction of Venus. Venus doesn't like death. Venus only likes comfort. Venus is about love. How can you say Venus is about just comfort?
We're not saying all about Venus, because Cleopatra was not, Cleopatra historically or in the play is not that side of love. Not every Venus person is an artist, and not every Venus person loves at that level. We have to take the material that's here in the play, you know.
No, I think you put it to your own biases.
Okay.
To that I would say my bias is completely in prejudice. Or my prejudice is completely